Everyone, I shared a little bit with you about Alice, a dear friend for many years, an extraordinary mindfulness teacher, an exceptional attorney before turning mindfulness teacher, and still. You've been kind to be, well, not only you and your husband, Alan, supportive of the Mindfulness in Law program over the years, but you have visited with students for many, many years, sometimes for lunch. This mindfulness Insightful Mind Initiative, the student organization, you'd stay and we would all have lunch together and talk, continue the conversation, and certainly dropping in on the Mindfulness in Law class. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
It's my pleasure.
Here's the class.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you today, and it's funny how you're saying, like, even looking at the word search can like elevate a little feeling of anxiety. Am I going to get them all? I can't find one or whatever. And I got here 10 or 15 minutes ago, and I went to law school here a million years ago, and Scott had given me the room number and everything, and I'm starting to walk around, and I'm like not finding the room, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like I'm going to be late, and all this anxiety started to come up. So I went in the library, and the librarian said, oh, this is where you need to go. And I actually walked to the room next door, but didn't walk far enough. And I'm like, I can't believe I can't find the room. It reminded me, I don't know if you've heard the Nelson Mandela quote, returning to a place where you've been before, but noticing how much you've changed. And usually when I think of that quote, I think of, my evolution or transformation or growth. And here I am in the law school, this place that was so familiar for so many years, and I can't find 216B. But
and I don't know what your experience was like in law school, but it sounds like it's still a source of anxiety.
Is it? Okay, all right.
I'm saying looking for your room.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's interesting. Like, it doesn't seem to always have a rhyme or reason. The librarian directed me one place, and then someone from admissions said, oh, come with me, and we walked inside the library, and we're walking all around, which was kind of fun, to go there and know that that's actually where I met my husband. So it was kind of fun. But
You've been married how many years?
What's that?
You've been married how many years?
Tomorrow is our 34th anniversary.
Tomorrow. Aww.
Not to date myself too much, but
that's
it's
a
actually
wonderful marker.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, I'm so happy to be here and to be with you. And I have the feeling that at this point in the class and the semester, you've probably heard a lot of the basics about mindfulness and bringing your attention to the present moment and noticing when your attention is somewhere else, and these different sorts of practices. And I thought that rather than go over the basics, maybe what I do is just kind of share with you a couple of things that I have found. Like, I've been practicing mindfulness for about over 20 years. And some of the things that I found that have been helpful for me, just to kind of share with you in case they may be something that would be helpful for you. And the first thing is to have a regular practice. And I'm just curious whether those of you who are here, whether you feel like you do have a regular practice or whether it's something that you struggle with. Does anybody care to talk about that or share anything?
Well, I think in the course
Can you just tell me your name?
Oh, yes, Brandon.
Brandon?
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I think within the course, that's something that Professor Rogers has kind of asked us to do, that we have our weekly practice journal. So we do kind of do a practice every day. And I think as we've been going through it, I kind of have a set time in the day that I do it. So it's typically like 20, 30 minutes after I wake up and I have some food, brush my teeth and stuff, I'll sit down and do my practice. But that's typically during the week. I think it's a little more difficult on the weekends when I just have other stuff going on. Sometimes I do forget to do it, but throughout the week it's a little easier to keep the practice going.
And in those times where you, like during the week it's one way, and then on the weekend it's maybe a little more challenging, the routine is different, are you okay with that? Like, is it okay that, there's a couple days where you just don't get to it or don't do it in the same way?
Yeah, I definitely, when I remember that I forgot to do it, happy that I'm doing it during the week, and then I can miss one or two if I just forget. So.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So, I mean, for me, I feel having some sort of a regular practice, a formal practice where you set aside the time is really helpful. But even if it's just informally practicing, anything that we do over and over again, we get stronger at and better at. And whether it's, practicing a musical instrument or going to the gym or just practicing being kind to ourselves, if we're doing it over and over, we're going to get better at it. And if you really want to have the benefits of the practice, which are multifold, having some sort of a regular practice, even if it's as short as just a couple minutes. And, I may be saying some things that might be contrary to what Professor Rogers has mentioned to you, but I feel that with people that I work with, I opened my business about 15 years ago, and some people just can't sit for longer than a couple minutes. And I think that even if it's 2 or 3 minutes, you can still derive the benefits with the hope that you would continue to build up kind of over time. So having a regular practice in some way or another, I think, is really helpful. And then Brandon just kind of touched on my second little tip or point, or something that's been helpful for me that I wanted to share with you, and that's to be attentive to how it is that you are relating to yourself, that inner voice. Sometimes for many of us, it's the inner critic, the inner judge that, is kind of like, why didn't I meditate, or why is my mind wandering, or why didn't I do better on the exam? And to be able to pay attention to that. I think for so many of us, that way of relating to ourselves just kind of goes under the radar, and we don't really notice it. And also in our culture, I think we're kind of trained to think that if we kind of beat ourselves up a little bit and we're a little harder on ourselves and we're like, what's wrong with you? Come on, you've got to do it better, that we're somehow going to accomplish the things we want to accomplish more easily. And what I found, and with many, many people that I've taught, that it's actually the opposite. That if you can relate to yourself in a kinder way, that your ease with which you move towards goals and just move forward in life is a lot easier. So that's my second tip, is just to kind of notice how you're relating to yourself. And you can do that within the practice. And it's something that you've probably heard about, noticing, when you're kind of, having that inner commentary of like, what's wrong with me? I can't even sit for 3 minutes without my mind just moving away and away. And that's how we train. We train in being kind to ourselves during the practice. And that kind of gets to my third and final tip, which is to cultivate or have some sort of practice of connection. And I think that for me, it's probably been the most transformative part of having a mindfulness practice, to whether it's, simply wishing yourself well, but hopefully within that kind of expanding your field of attention and thinking about others. Part of what connects us as being human is that we all just want to feel okay. We all just want to have our needs met. And sometimes we lose sight of that, we're all in this together in that way. We want to feel like we have, a roof over our heads, we have food to eat, we have clothing, and probably more than that, to just have some inner sense of well-being. And it's what all of us, as humans want. And to want that for ourselves, that it's okay to want that for yourself, and to realize that, the person that cut you off in traffic or, didn't hold the door open for you wants to feel the same way too. And it can push our buttons at times when people relate to us in a way that's unkind, but cultivating this within ourselves helps us to manage through that. And I think that the research shows that the practices of connection really do help to lower feelings of stress and anxiety. And I think it's been really helpful for me, and I'd like to guide us through a connection practice. But before I do that, I'd like to just guide us through a practice that is more of a general mindfulness practice, a focused attention practice, and so that we could do it together. I think just even before I do that, just to say, I think one of the things that's been really helpful for me is to avail myself of different teachers. Everybody has a little bit of a different style in offering mindfulness practices, and I think there's no one better than Professor Rogers to, introduce you and teach you and be there for you, to support you in this journey. But it is also helpful to just kind of, I guess, in refining or trying to develop your own mindfulness practice, to just, whether it's in person with other teachers or online through Zoom with other teachers or through pre-recorded things, to just notice that different people have a different way of teaching this, and it helps you to distill what's right for you and crystallize it, so that if this is something that you want to continue to be dedicated to, you develop your own style. So with that, why don't we just take a little bit of time to practice? And I would invite you to just allow your body to settle into a comfortable but supportive posture. And you can close your eyes if that's comfortable. If not, you're welcome to keep your eyes open, or simply lower your gaze to a couple feet in front of you. Eyes open or closed, either way works. And I always like to begin my own practice and the practices I guide with inviting you to bring your attention to your body and just kind of notice if there are any places where you might be holding unnecessary tightness or tension, and see if it's possible to just begin to let go. So sometimes that's just a matter of letting your shoulders soften, or allowing your hands to relax and just rest gently wherever they're comfortable. Sometimes we hold tightness or tension in the muscles of the face, around the mouth or the eyes. So you might want to bring your attention there and just see, can you soften? And it's not doing this so that we just settle into relaxation, because we know that's not going to always happen. But it's just a matter of letting your body be at ease as much as it can. And oftentimes, once we do that, the mind kind of follows along a little bit. And there are other times where the mind doesn't follow along at all, and that's okay too. So then I would invite you to begin to bring your attention to the points of contact between your body and the seat. So this is just beginning to pay attention to bodily sensations that are very ordinary, the feelings of contact. So you might begin to notice the backs of the legs against the seat, or your back against the seat back if you're seated that way. You could begin to bring your attention down to your feet and just feel your feet wherever they're making contact, however they're making contact. And then beginning to bring your attention to your hands. there's often a lot to pay attention to in our bodies that's so ordinary that it can often go under the radar of our awareness. So you might want to begin with just feeling where the hands are making contact. And then exploring a little bit further and just noticing any other sensations that might be there at the hands. Sometimes we can sense into the air that's kind of enveloping the hands, or the hands feeling dry or moist. We don't need to change anything or make it different. We're just paying attention. And of course, we know as we sit, as we do this, at some point, and maybe at many points, our attention is going to wander away. That moment is important and special because in that moment that you've noticed you're no longer present, you have this choice to come back, to be with your hands again or whatever object of focus you're practicing with, and just start again, being gentle with yourself. And then what I'd like to do is invite you to move your attention to listening, to being with the sounds around you or possibly the sounds within you. Sometimes we have sounds that are coming from the body that we're able to notice. So just moving your attention to the sounds around you and within you. You might start by noticing the sounds that are nearby. And maybe noticing the sounds that might be further away. Allowing whatever sounds are there to be there. Sometimes when we practice in this way with mindful listening, being with the sounds are pleasant. And other times when we practice, they're unpleasant. But it's helpful to notice whether you could be with all the sounds that are arising, even if it's just for a moment. And then you could begin to bring your attention back to your body. And if you have a practice of being with the breath that's familiar to you, I would invite you to begin practicing with the breath in a way that feels comfortable. I often suggest that it's helpful to bring the attention to your abdomen, because usually at this part of the body, the sensations of the breath are easier to detect. If you're having a time when you feel the mind is really busy, or if you just simply feel that it might be more helpful, you can always place the palm of your hand on your abdomen, just so you could feel what's happening here. But if you have your own practice of being with the breath at the nostrils or the chest or some other way, it's perfectly fine for you to do that. Noticing when your attention is no longer here, and gently coming back and starting over. You may have heard this suggestion before, but I think that it's helpful, especially if the mind is busy or you're anxious. You could silently repeat the words in and out, or rising and falling. They're just words that go along with the sensations of the breath. And sometimes they act as a little handrail to keep us present or just support us in being present. However this is happening for you is okay. It's one of the beautiful things about a mindfulness practice is there's really no right or wrong, or good or bad. We just simply try to accept how things are in this moment. And if you're noticing that you're getting a little sleepy, which can often happen, you could sit up a little straighter, or just take a couple of deeper breaths to feel a greater sense of wakefulness. And conversely, if you're feeling busy in the mind, you might want to just relax your body again. As you continue to feel the sensations of the breath, not needing to change the breath or make it different. And when you're ready, you could begin to either open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll bring this practice session to an end, reconnecting with your surroundings. So I always find it helpful to just have a little opportunity to share any observations you had with the practice, anything you struggled with, any questions that you have, and then just spend a couple minutes doing that, and then I'll guide you through a connection practice. Was anybody getting sleepy?
I was getting a little sleepy.
You were?
Towards
Okay.
the end. I have found, we've been in this class, I think, for 2 months, almost 3 maybe. I feel like I've noticed the progress over time. When I first started mindfulness practices, my mind would wander all the time, especially when I was going through very stressful times in my life. There are some 6 or 12-minute practices where the attention just was not there, no matter how hard I tried. But this week especially, I have found that it's been a lot easier to stay more focused. And maybe that's just because there's not as much going on in my life as there typically is. But I do think that it partially is attributed to kind of the consistency and the practices. And so yeah, it's definitely been very rewarding. Yeah.
That's so good. Can you tell me your name?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
My
that's
name's Kristen, yes.
Kristen?
Yeah.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
And it is so interesting that at some point, if we continue to practice this, you just start to notice something, and it may be very subtle, that you're just relating to the things that are happening in a different way. And as you said, maybe it's as a result of things not being as stressful in your life right now, but quite possibly it's the practice that you've been engaged in, and the benefits of it are starting to show up a little bit. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have anything they notice? Or
Daniel.
Nice to meet you.
I think it's kind of interesting, like, it's sort of like learning a new language. I mean, you two have worked together, obviously, and so, you kind of follow a similar mindfulness kind of practice approach to it, using the same language. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I just think it's interesting. Like, a few months ago, I would have no idea what to do, and even though you've never guided a practice for us, like, it didn't feel foreign at all. So it's just like kind of easier to fall into it.
And And it's and thank you for sharing that. And it's so true. It's like this is so different than anything we've ever done before. I don't know if any of you had practiced at all before taking the class, but you know, I just remember too, like going back to my first times of being introduced to this, and it felt so foreign, you know, what am I supposed to be doing and how am I supposed to be feeling? And then it's kind of, you have a point where it clicks a little bit, and it's kind of like you just have this sense of confidence or familiarity with what's happening, and it can start to feel okay. And if that hasn't happened yet, that's okay too, because, you know, it's just, we're all different in terms of how we evolve and how we come along with something like this. So, yeah. What's your
My
name?
name is Louis.
Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you too. Just as an addition to what you just said, and what your Daniel said, things could feel foreign at the beginning, and throughout the class we learned possibly, you know, total 8 or 9 different, you know, between practices and settling techniques. And I think the first couple of weeks for me was very interesting because some things felt right and some didn't. But I think there's the universe of mindfulness is so vast that really, I mean, I think once you find what works for you. So
Yeah.
in this instance, you said something about, you know, sort of like scanning what points or parts of your body may have some, like, you know, an added pressure or tension. And to me, that actually resonated. And I'm probably going to continue using that. So just going back to your first advice of practicing often, I think just part of our choosing of, you know, at least for me before law school, I thought I was possibly able to sit through things a bit more comfortably. And then I started this journey of law school, and everything felt so rushed. And my workload just tripled or even more.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to walk out of law school with that pattern.
Yeah.
And I think this has been sort of like a blessing in disguise to, like.
I think so. I mean, it certainly wasn't there when I attended law school, and I feel that it's so amazing and terrific that you get to take advantage of Professor Rogers and having this class, because it can be such a support. And I think the other thing that you're touching on that's really just so important is making the practice your own, finding a way that feels okay for you to engage in it. And it's kind of why I said availing yourself of different teachers or listening to different recordings, because at the end of the day, it's you sitting with yourself and you navigating through your life on your own. So making it your practice that feels right for you. And then just, I only looked through the Mindful Law student book briefly, but just in noticing the sandwich practices, which is, I think, a term that you developed and a way of, you know, kind of teaching this in this way, I thought that is such a wonderful term, and it's such a wonderful way to approach this, and in an effort, I think, to really make this your own, because you can develop a way where there's a little mindful movement or just a settling practice and trying to relax a little bit and then more focused attention. And it's really giving you this opportunity to just refine and develop your own practice, which I've seen for myself has really kind of shifted and changed over time. I think another big thing that's been so helpful for me is giving myself permission to do it in the way that feels okay for me. And it really has allowed the practice to come alive for me in that way. And with that in mind, I did want to have time to guide you through a connection practice. It's really something that personally I have focused on so much, and I, said I go through these periods, and I'm going through one right now where it's my primary practice is a kindness or compassion or connection practice, and I just find that it's so supportive and so helpful. Not everyone will relate to that in the same way that that I have, but I think it really can be helpful. So I'm going to guide you through a practice. And have they done connection practices already? Okay.
Just recently begun to do some, so it's a
Okay.
great time to be.
Okay. So there's all different ways to engage in these practices of connection. I'm going to guide us through a practice where we begin with ourselves. You don't have to begin with yourself. Again, there's no right way, but I think that it's helpful to kind of notice, like, whether that feels okay for you. And I think that's just another point with the connection practice. As with any mindfulness practice, you're not required to feel anything as you're doing this. So although we're cultivating a sense of connection, it's not about having to feel an emotion. It could feel very mechanical and very rote. I'm going to offer up some possibly familiar phrases of you to offer to yourselves, and then we'll expand the circle of attention to other people. So as you're ready, you could just settle back into a comfortable position, maybe just taking that moment to notice whether it would be helpful to relax anywhere, soften anywhere in the body. We don't want to be too rigid, and at the same time, we don't want to be too slumped over. So finding a sense of ease in your body that feels right for you. Closing your eyes if that's comfortable, or lowering your gaze to a couple feet in front of you. Now, you might want to begin by bringing your attention back to your breath, just to have kind of a home base as we go through this practice. And knowing that at any time as I guide you through this, if you feel that it would be more helpful or supportive to be with your breath instead of with the phrases that I'll offer, you can always make that choice for yourself, using your own inner wisdom to know what's right for you. And we'll begin with turning our attention inward towards ourselves. And maybe I'll just invite you to think about your own sense of well-being. Your own sense of feeling okay might be another way to talk about it or think about it. What does that look like for you? What is it that you might be free from if you felt a sense of okayness or well-being? Or what is it or who is it that might be with you? So just kind of taking a moment as best as you can to think about or envision your own sense of well-being or okayness. And then I'll offer some phrases of connection or kindness, and you can repeat them silently to yourself, finding a rhythm that feels right for you. And the first phrase we'll practice with is, "May I be safe." When we offer this thought or phrase to ourselves, it's not just physical safety, but I like to think about it in terms of being free from fear. May I be safe. then the next phrase we'll practice with is, may I be happy. If that word doesn't sit right with you, you might want to try, may I be calm, or may I be peaceful, or may I be mindful. In essence, that is what we're offering to ourselves. So see what word feels right for you, and practice with that. Knowing just like when we're with the breath and our attention wanders off, the same holds true with the phrases. Those are the focus of our attention right now. And when you notice your attention has gone elsewhere, you just gently come back and say the phrase again. And then we'll practice with, may I be healthy. Sometimes when we're dealing with a health issue, it may feel easier to say, may I be as healthy as I can be, knowing that there is something that we're struggling with. And finally, may I live with ease, or may things go easily for me. Maybe just taking a moment to kind of notice how the practice was for you. Did it feel challenging? Did it seem to come along easily? Doesn't matter how it has happened. It's just the ability to notice. And then what we'll do is practice sending out these phrases to others. And we'll do it maybe in a little different way. I don't know if you've done it this way before, but what I'd like you to do is to think about the people in your life that you feel an ease with, a warmth towards, a connection with. Could be friends or family, or a pet. And if you can, maybe even imagining a group of people where you're standing in the center and they're in a circle around you, or a semicircle around you, where you can kind of look at them. And if for any reason this feels challenging to bring up more than one person, you could always just do this with one person, but maybe for today, we'll just kind of practice with trying to bring up several people or a group of people. And we'll offer the phrases out to them, wanting these people we care about to feel well in every aspect. So as you glance around at them in your mind, offering to them, may you be safe. May you be happy or peaceful or calm. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. And maybe for a moment, just imagining that these people are sending those phrases back to you. They're wishing that you be safe, happy, healthy, and living with ease. And again, you don't need to feel anything in particular, but you might want to just notice how doing the practice in this way has been. And when you're ready, you could gently open your eyes or lift your gaze and reconnect to the world around you. So I know we probably have to start to wrap up, but anyone have any thoughts or comments on that practice?
No rush, no rush.
Tell me your name.
I'm Sammy.
Nice to meet you,
Nice to
Sammy.
meet you too. I've been having a tricky situation recently, and that practice has definitely resonated with me the most these past 2 weeks because I really can't do a lot for myself at the moment. Like I can't drive or get to class on my own. So like when you bring up like making a circle of people, like I have so many people that have been helping me. So it's nice to reflect on it because I'm so busy right now. So being able to like take that time has been really nice. So I appreciate that practice a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm wishing you well, and I
Thank
think
you.
it kind of touches on another aspect of this practice. I kind of differentiated a little bit, which is the practices of kindness, which is what we just did, and also the practices of compassion, which in my mind, when I think about that, it's when we're having some kind of a struggle or difficulty, or someone else is having a struggle or difficulty, and being able to acknowledge that and recognize some, we all will go through life and have times that are difficult, whether they're physical things or emotional things or circumstantial things, and having some sort of self-compassion practice where we can recognize our challenges or our difficulties and just say, I want to feel okay. May things go easily for me. Or may I, be relieved of what it is that's difficult, or may it just, move on in an easy way. So I think, you're kind of touching upon that and sharing with us your situation, which I think is important. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
Made me think back on the second point that you brought up earlier, which is like listening to your inner voice. I remember a while back, it kind of reminded me of it, hearing like the expression, you are the product of the 3 people or whatever that you associate with most. And then also, what you associate with your own thoughts probably more than anything else. And if all those thoughts are negative, like for me throughout the day, it's pretty rare that I'm saying like, oh, good job, Daniel, like good or bad. It's usually like, oh, you're an idiot. And it's like, if you had a best friend or someone that you were with all day, and they were just calling you an idiot all day, like, would you hang out with them? Probably not. And so it's sort of like, why are you doing that to yourself? So I think, wishing yourself health and happiness, I think that's pretty important.
And it's such a good point, all the different points that you're making. And I will just tell you that I know that I noticed early on that I was so wired to speak to myself in the way that you're describing. And it's not that I don't do it anymore, but I really have noticed that, the voice of, negative thoughts or self-critical thoughts is so much softer or infrequent as a result of the way that I've practiced. And I think that, to kind of, not that you always have to be praising yourself and congratulating yourself, but if you're just, devoid of that, little inner critic that's beating you up, I mean, it really makes a lot of difference, and it creates a lot of space for a lot of other ways of thinking, kind of gives you a little more bandwidth for your attention on other things.
As I was going through the practice, this guided practice, the things that you mention are sort of like pillars in our life that keeps us having a balanced lifestyle. And what was going through my mind was that, scenarios or mental pictures of situations where maybe I felt safe but not calm or wasn't healthy. And but I think that it compensates to knowing that maybe you have 3 out of 4.
Maybe you have to what?
3 out of 4. Maybe you don't feel healthy
Right,
initially,
yeah.
but you still have balance because you keep going because you feel safe. Things are coming with ease in other aspects of your life. So I thought it was interesting to. I think it's important to actually, live in that equilibrium, like having, all those things or being aware of those things in your life. Sometimes we just again, we rush through everything and we don't think about those important things that are stabilizing.
And I think you're bringing up a good point. It's, can we feel a sense of balance, an inner balance, even if all those 4 things aren't present? And I mean, my take on it, or my sense of it, is that you can have this sense of evenness. Sometimes it's talked about in terms of equanimity, where you can be with whatever's happening and have some sense of okayness. And I think it's a skill that we train in, because the tendency is, if something is happening that doesn't feel okay, within us, outside of us, or whatever, we're just like completely taken with that and have a lot of negativity about it. But I think there's this training, which is what you're doing, which gives us a sense of balance, even if, we're not feeling well on a given day, or we're dealing with an injury or a situation, that we can develop this inner resource, this inner skill of inner balance, really, and be okay with whatever is occurring. Yeah.
Does that speak a little bit towards like the just is mind?
Yes, right. So in chapter 5 on mindfulness, after learning the focused attention practice and the body scan and the open monitoring, and just before getting to love and kindness or connection, but as a building upon the practices to develop various skills and capacities, and as an end unto themselves, chapter 5 offers the mindfulness as a really allow the moment to be as it just is, without a particular instruction, because we've been cultivating those capacities.
Which gives you such a great sense of resilience and yeah.
I just thought it was interesting when we were doing that practice. There was a memory from the past that I haven't thought about in a while, but it was like an event that I thought that I hadn't handled properly, and I thought about for some time, but it hasn't been recently. It was kind of like years ago, and I think the practice like helped me like almost make peace with it and not be so hard on myself. Just like have kindness, and it was interesting because that hasn't come up in a while, so I thought it was so fascinating that it just came up in the middle of the practice.
And tell me your name?
Caroline.
Caroline, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that I'm happy for you, obviously, because it sounds like something that feels like there's some further completeness, but it also kind of touches on this insight that can come while we engage in these practices. It may never come. It may never happen. And it's not that we're expecting things like that to a memory to come up or some little thing that you're struggling with to all of a sudden feel like you've worked it through. But when we have this time to sit quietly and just be with ourselves, oftentimes we have some sort of insight or further analysis or information about something that can feel very, very supportive and very helpful.
If we could, after, well, okay, sensitive to our time, but to really maximize and optimize our time with Alice, after the 2 questions, and maybe right around the hour we'll close. But then maybe if there are questions you have about you know, here you have a wonderful mindfulness teacher who people seek out to say, help me learn mindfulness, and they've got lots of questions and lots of things on their little journey. As you all are, you know, 10 weeks in and working on your papers and thinking about how you're going to share with others and working with your own practice, let's maybe also, if you'd like to ask some questions that could be very helpful to you, or little pointers, which of course has been happening all along, but maybe in an even more specific way. So, Kristen.
I heard you talk about meditation earlier when you first came, so my question is broader, but maybe for both of you. Is meditation a form of mindfulness, or is meditation and mindfulness two different beings?
Let's table that larger conversation, and it is addressed in chapter 5,
Okay.
and we didn't spend as much time with it in class as we could have, so we will. I mean, I'm very thrilled for you to give a quick little answer, but there can be a larger conversation that we can save for another day.
Just, I guess, very briefly and quickly, I think of it as there's many different types of meditation. There's transcendental meditation, there's mantra meditation, and mindfulness is this kind of way of being and way of living our lives that we can strengthen through mindfulness meditation. So we can be mindful without meditating, but we can use meditation as a way to strengthen our mindfulness. And I think it's more expansive than that, but just as a...
Okay, so you just distinguished mindfulness from mindfulness practice. Right, good. And you also began by distinguishing there's many types of meditation, and mindfulness meditation would arguably be a subset of the many kinds of meditations.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that.
That's okay, good. So important. We'll address it.
I had more of an observation than a question, if that's okay?
Yeah, please.
I really loved in the practice that you kind of like further defined or qualified some of them, like with the safetiness that's like a free of fear, or health, when you said like as healthy as I can be. I noticed that like I have a chronic autoimmune disease, and I kind of like scoffed at it at first, like I'll never be healthy, whatever, and which is like, you know, really negative, obviously, which is completely not the point of the practice at all. So I really liked that you added, you know, like maybe if you're not healthy as you can be, because that was it, like made me switch gears of more of like a hopeful, like kind of the point of the practice to be kind to yourself rather than like scoffing at it like I did originally. So it really, I liked that a lot.
I'm glad, because it's so true. I mean, we're human, and we're gonna struggle, and we're not always going to feel healthy, and maybe, but we can have health in a particular way, or we can be as healthy as we can be. So, yeah. And if we're breathing and if we're here, we have some amount and modicum of health. So, yeah.
All right, a few moments of questions you all may have.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just wondering, when you first started practicing, what were some of the changes in yourself and like your thoughts, and maybe even how efficient you were in the workplace that you started to notice? And because I feel like those are motivating factors to continue the practice, just when you get to see the changes.
So I think of myself as someone that's very wired to be anxious and stressed, and I think I noticed it more as I began to practice, but it's what drew me to the practice. When I was practice of mindfulness, I was practicing law as a business litigator and married and 2 children, and they were little, and raising a family and trying to balance everything and feeling just incredibly stressed, and someone recommended that I try this, and I just started to notice that my life wasn't changing. My workload wasn't changing. My responsibilities of being, a wife and a mother and everything, that wasn't changing. But I really started to feel different. My buttons weren't getting pushed in the same way, and it's just increased over time. And for me, at some point, I just realized that this should be available to everyone. You don't need any special equipment or or skill or training, and it's really what led me to retire from the practice of law. I'm still licensed to practice because it's something I worked hard at and I don't want to give that up, but to say, like, there's a lot of attorneys out there in Miami who are really wonderful, but at the time, especially, you know, going back 15 years ago, there weren't that many people that were offering this. And I've just seen, for me, that, you know, I've had my share of, you know, life's issues and difficulties, but being with whatever it is that's occurring just feels very different. I feel different within myself. I feel different within my life. And I've seen it too with the clients that I have that I've worked with, some of whom I've worked with for quite a long time. And I'm thinking of one person in particular that I've, you know, worked with once a week. I don't work with everyone like that, but I do a lot of individual mindfulness teaching for 10 years, over 10 years, and he's now struggling with a severe illness, and it's just watching how he's shifted over time to be dealing with something that's, you know, somewhat of a health crisis, and it's just really incredible. And so, yes, I encourage you to continue this in whatever way you can. You know, the class will come to an end. There's these other supports within the law school and within the greater community. It's helpful to have some support of a group, whether that's online or in person, to just have either some accountability or just feel a sense of camaraderie, which is really important too.
And the mindfulness Zoom on Fridays, that will certainly be continuing as you all continue your career. The first Friday, Alice guides and has guided for the last 10 years plus. So you're all welcome to, while you're still here, and certainly in time to come, to drop in on that weekly Zoom if the timing works for you.
You don't have to put your camera on. You can keep your video off the whole time and just, you know, be there within yourself. But it's a nice way to take advantage of other guiding from, there's other people that are there every week, and just it's a nice support because we're all attorneys coming together and with that same desire to want to practice.
Daniel, did you have?
You sort of answered my question. So my question was whether there was a particular event that sort of made you transition from law into mindfulness, or if it was just like the cumulative stress of life. So I think you touched on that.
I feel like, you know, we can feel this okayness or this balance. I mean, you know, whatever word you want to give to it, well-being. And we can do that for ourselves. We can't control all these other things, but we can feel okay in the midst of all the little storms of life. Yeah.
I just wanted to know, what is your mindfulness practice? Is it, do you do it twice a day, once a day in the morning, at night? Just a little bit of insight on that.
So formally, I practice in the morning, and you know, it's just like I think it was mentioned earlier, there's times where I don't get to it. I mean, I try to make it a point to do it every day because I think it's helpful, even if, and there's been many times where that time is a minute, but it's a minute of intentional practice. And I'm doing a lot of guiding throughout the day, so while I'm guiding, I'm actually practicing myself too. And what I like to think about is this idea of seasoning the day with mindfulness. Instead of, like, you know, if you had a salt shaker and you wanted to put a little salt on your food, you wouldn't like dump it upside down and pour the whole bottle on your food, but you sprinkle it like on whatever you're eating if you care to put salt on it. And I like to think about the mindfulness practice like that. Are there moments of mindfulness, on the spot practices, which I know Professor Rogers shares in the book, where you can just have a moment during the day where you take a breath or kind of take stock of how you're feeling, or just offer, you know, think of something that you're grateful for. So to try and sprinkle it throughout the day, and I do try to do that. I try to practice that too.
So the last question, Jamie.
My name is Jamie.
Oh,
by the
hi,
way.
nice to meet you.
And nice to meet you too. So my question is like how you frame when you go into your mindfulness practices, because you've had a long relationship with mindfulness and practicing frequently, and we've had a shorter term relationship, but I find that, you know, Professor Rogers mentioned this at one point in time, that like mindfulness is essentially like, you know, you could frame it as in like, you know, you're working out or like lifting weights for like your mind. How do you go about framing your relationship with mindfulness to continue to motivate yourself to do it long term?
That's a good question. For me, it's, you know, I do have times where I think back, and I probably did this about 2 months in to initially starting to practice mindfulness meditation 20 plus years ago. I would take time, and sometimes I'll do it at the beginning of the year or at other times, where I reflect back on, you know, a time of how I handled something and how I'm doing now. And I think that it can be really helpful because over time, and some of you have mentioned this and you've started to notice subtle changes with how you're relating to things. But I think when we take a little bit of time to reflect back to some point in the past, we can start to notice how we're shifting and changing. And it's not linear. It's not like it just keeps building up and going along, but we start to sense it and feel it. And also to notice the moments when you're not feeling the way you'd like to feel, whether it's how you're relating to other people or the stressors in your life or some elevated feeling of anxiety, and knowing and trusting, and this is something that comes over time, that this is a practice in a way that can help with that. So I don't know if that completely answered the question, but it's really paying attention to yourself in a nutshell.
Last question. What are you all going to do tomorrow night to celebrate? If you're going to do anything tomorrow night to celebrate your 34 years together.
So I have my oldest son, who is an attorney, and he's actually the lead counsel for the Miami Marlins. And he lives in Miami with his wife, who works at the Children's Trust. And my younger son, who lives in New York City, works in finance, happens to be in town. So I have both of my children and my daughter-in-law, and the 5 of us are going to go out for a nice dinner. So it'll be really nice to be together. So I just want to say that I've really thoroughly enjoyed being with you and sharing mindfulness with you. And I always feel when I do this, when I'm with anyone, I learn so much. You know, I know the purpose of me being here is to teach and offer some things to you, but I learn so much in being with you and just how, you know, you're working through these practices. So I want to thank you for that. And also just to let you know that if you do have other questions and you just feel like of course, Professor Rogers is here, but if you feel that you have a question or something you're struggling with that you'd like to talk through with your mindfulness practice, I'm always available. You can find me. Mindful Time is my business, and I'm happy to be helpful. So I know it's not easy. It's not easy being in law school. It's, you know, not easy developing this kind of a practice, which is fairly unfamiliar for most of us. So it's helpful to have the support and know there's someone there that can kind of help you as you go along, because there will be times when you doubt what you're doing with all of this and whether it is really helpful. And to have somebody that you can talk to and ask those questions to can often be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Alice, for being here.